Everyone, welcome back to Business is Personal. I'm Dr. Corrie, and with me today is Zeta and Talat. We're talking about leadership. Thank you so much for being with us today. Today, I am really excited because we are talking about leadership, and that is one of my favorite topics. So you're exactly the kinds of people that I want to talk to you about this. A great executive career coach and a great executive HR director. What is your take on the state of leadership in the organizations that you see, and what needs to be done in order to improve the quality of it?
I don't think people understand the difference between management and leadership, or being a manager and a leader. I think the term leadership is used loosely, really to describe anyone who looks after more than one person.
Right.
I think I really find what's most missing, really, in my experience, and in the many companies that I worked at, is patience. I think very few companies have the patience to develop people and take the time to let them learn from their mistakes, to let them go ahead. I think it's very much they're not working out, one mistake and they're out, and they're not a leader, get the next one. And so it's like this cycle where you keep hiring a new leader in that position, and they fail, and then somebody else comes. So I think it's around patience. It's around understanding that it's going to take time to develop people into those leadership positions, and understanding of what really leadership is and what it means. Right. So I think really it's about giving that time, which we don't seem to have. I think there's very little patience in the region, and in how quickly people want the company to grow and prosper and do well.
I agree with you, Zeta.
So essentially what happens is people go through the organization, but they don't understand that leadership is a skill. But you're not trained in that skill from the moment that you enter that organization.
That's such a good point.
Right? So it's like, right, you're a leader, now go. And it's like, well, where was my training?
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of these people are just kind of flying by the seat of their pants.
Yeah.
They are just reading books and trying to get all of this knowledge about, what should a leader be. And there's so much conflicting advice over there about visionary leadership, strategic leadership, tactical leadership. So everyone's like, well, I don't know what I should be doing. And then there's authentic leadership, so I should just be myself. But hey, I don't know how to lead, so what does that even look like? So I think there's a gap in terms of the development and the skills based, and exactly what you were saying is that there's this mindset of survival. So even though an organization has got out of that survival period in that first sort of 2 years, that survival mindset just stays even 10 years later, 15 years later, and it's like, we've got to make decisions now, we've got to do this now, and there's that impatience, and it's this scarcity mindset, and it feeds down through the organization.
Yes.
So I think those are definitely two areas that need to be considered.
Absolutely. I totally echo what you said about there not being any leadership training in our organizations. Generally speaking, this is a huge blindside. So you think about your job, you start off as a labor or a technical job, and then if you do really well, they pull you out of the technical job that you're doing really well at, right? And then they make you manage people, and now all of a sudden your job is like 60% technical and 40% people, but they don't train you how to do that management. And then if you actually move through the ranks, if you stumble your way up the ladder far enough, you end up in the place where you're not managing as much as you're leading.
Yes.
And so then the amount of your work becomes 20%, maybe 10% technical, and at the C-suite, you're like doing 10% technical work, 90% people. That people isn't just management, it is leadership, and it has to be really good, but we don't teach it. Nope. And we don't recognize when those transitions happen.
And also importantly, Corrie, is like, even if you teach it as an organization, even if you have a great system where you want to put people through this, I just find that there's this huge ego that exists around here where they feel, I don't need to learn anything. Half the people you put down for these things don't turn up for these sessions, or they turn up late, or they don't really behave professionally when they're there, or their comments are not really, people aren't learning much from them. So I just find there's this huge sense of, now that I'm labeled a leader, I'm just amazing. I don't need to learn anything. I've already got that endorsement.
True. That's really true. I think, you get these, and this is a generalization, but you get these high achievers, and they're very KPI driven, and they're achieving their results, and that's what they're really, really good at. They're not necessarily great at the people side of things, but they're really good at hitting their targets. They're ambitious, they're gap-listed, etc. So then they get into these leadership positions, and it's like, well, I wanted the title, I wanted the recognition, but I don't want the responsibility.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Or there's a lack of understanding of what that responsibility actually is in terms of interpersonal relationships. And hashtag humans, not resources. You have to deal with people, not just the budgetary impact of those people being with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? So there's that. And very recently, I've found a way to measure what you were talking about, that lack of understanding of where leadership, how important leadership is. So I've been teaching leadership for 20 years. I've been doing these programs in organizations all over the world. And I developed what I call the Enlightenment Score,
Right.
which is where I ask leaders, on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong are you as a leader? And then they tell me before the program. Then after the program, I ask them again, how strong were you before you started? And I don't let them see the score that they gave before, but then they score themselves.
Right.
And I've got more than 100 different executives on this scale now, and they're averaging about 12% off.
Wow.
So they're saying, yeah, I was actually about 12% off in my own assessment of myself before I took this program, and we learned what actually leadership was. So there's
Super cool.
so I'm getting them to admit their own ignorance.
Yes.
And that should be a lesson for us, because that is the average. The average executive is 12% off in their assessment of their own leadership skills.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. And it's so true. It's first tell them, they need to know what it is. They don't know what they don't know, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah, the other interesting thing is I asked them to measure the improvement that they made during the program, just however long it was, 3 days, 5 days, whatever. And then they've indicated a 22% increase in their own abilities. So they've said, yeah, I was 12% off in my assessment, but I gained 22% in the process. So there's that recognition of the value of actual real input in leadership. And to be honest, most executives aren't reading. They say they're reading, they're actually not doing it. Yeah, they're not doing it.
No one reads. They don't even read a 10-line email.
Yeah, they say, oh yeah, I'm going to read a book a month, and they have these goals, I'm going to read a book, and they just don't do it. They don't do it, because the difference, I think, that what really makes the difference between mediocre leadership and great leadership is discipline. It's not motivation, it's not charisma, it's discipline.
Yes.
The ability to choose what you want to do in spite of how you feel about it.
Yeah, very true.
What do you think?
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And I just find also, as organizations, and having worked in so many different organizations, I find unfortunately, sadly, we set people up for failure, and we set up leaders for failure.
Yeah, sure.
Because we put them, like you said, great sales guy doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
Make him a sales manager, and he, has absolutely goes south, and he hasn't done. He can't get other people because we haven't given him the skill sets. And then at the end of the day, it's all about. I just find organizations all about the money. What's the productivity? What's the revenue? What's the top line, bottom line? It doesn't matter if you behave badly.
Yeah.
Okay, to get that, it's okay. That's what's more important. So when you put those kind of values at the base of your organization, what kind of leaders are you going to have?
Yeah,
If that's what it's about.
That's
and again, we go back to that whole patience. There's no patience to build a brand.
That's right.
To build an organization that leaves a legacy. That sadly is going away, and really they just want to make this really valuable, and we want to spin this off or sell this off in 4 years, and we want to be, the next Kareem or Souk deal in the region.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is.
One of the biggest symptoms of that as a terminal illness is layoffs, redundancies for cost saving. So it's fine if you remove somebody from your community because they're not performing well. They made a commitment to your community, and if they're not doing their job, then maybe they should make room for somebody who's passionate about doing that job and participating with the community. But if you're cutting people to save money on the bottom line, that is an absolute no-no. We are not resources. We are humans, and humans in relationship in these corporate communities or corporate tribes. We've made, what did you call it, psychological contracts with each other?
Psychological
Tell us
contracts.
about that.
Yeah, so it is like when you join an organization, it takes a while to build that trust with the organization, and it's both ways. So it's not just a piece of paper. That contract that you sign that's the physical contract that you have with the company. But I think it's more about mentally how engaged you are, mentally how contracted or how engaged you are with that organization. And that builds up over a period of time. So, there's a lot of talk now about, what if an organization said to you, take half your pay, but, continue to work for us and keep your job, or, don't take pay for the next 3 months, we're going through a hard time. I think in companies where those psychological contracts are full of trust and where there's been a give and take, and where the employee, when they've been at a low in their life, the company has helped them,
Absolutely.
has supported them. I promise you they will do it.
That's
you know,
right.
they will be engaged, they will do it. But
Yeah,
if
yeah.
there's been a company which has not treated you well, you know, which is just runs by policies and processes, I think the employee's probably going to say,
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you very much, I'm not interested and I'm going to the labor court tomorrow
Exactly.
to report you.
Exactly.
This is what happens.
Then you end up with a whole other problem, right?
Absolutely, there's the whole legal take on that as well, which is
Zeta,
not pleasant for any organization.
Have you ever been made redundant?
I've been made redundant twice.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
And what did it do to your trust in the organizations?
Oh, well, I mean, the first one was actually during the financial crisis in 2008, 2009.
Right.
So, I mean, that was incredible. So I was working in recruitment back then. And it was like I had front row seats to how companies were reacting to this.
Yeah, sure.
So we were at work one day, everything was absolutely fine. And then we came into work the next day and we turned on our computers and then the story of Lehman Brothers was just everywhere. And then we checked our emails and every single client was like, recruitment is now on hold, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And then literally within a few days, we had people saying, I've just lost my job, I've just lost my job, I've just lost my job. And it was just coming in and coming in. And that just it just showed how reactive companies were to the financial markets. And so when I was made redundant in that time, I was actually made redundant about 9 months later. During that time, I hadn't I hadn't done anything. I mean, I was working financial services. So I was, you know, on the phone and everyone was like, are you joking? They were laughing at me. Like, do you honestly think we're doing any recruitment right now? So when I was made redundant in 9 months later, it was inevitable, you know, it was kind of expected. And I'd only been with the company less than a year. So that psychological contract wasn't necessarily there. And then the second time around when I was made redundant, that was due to a company restructure because my boss left.
Wow.
And so because he left, and I was directly reporting in, like there was a political storm and allegiances and alliances, and they said, we can't have you because if we bring in the new guy, you're already aligned to the ex guy, so we need to get rid of you. And it was just insane. But going back to the making redundancies because of cost cutting, I just think I think it can be way too reactive. Too reactive, and the cost is insane.
I think it's the most expensive cost-cutting strategy in history.
Agreed.
Is
you know
to
why
cut your talent, right?
You know why it's so rampant now, and why it's so rampant to so many companies. It all goes back to the whole performance management system.
Sure.
It's because they don't have a good performance management system, because even now managers don't like to give performance or strong performance feedback or have those really strong conversations with employees. That's why these redundancies happen, because like you said, for performance, absolutely follow a process.
Yes.
Give a first verbal warning, written warning, second written warning. If it's
Absolutely.
not working, let them go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nope. Then again goes back to patience. They don't have the patience to see that process through, or because they haven't seen that process through, suddenly it becomes we can't wait for 3 months or 4 months to do this. Just let them go now. And because the legal system, unfortunately, is not set up to support employees so much at this point, you know, so there isn't really a lot of recourse apart from them going and complaining about arbitrary dismissal, in which case they can get 2 to 3 months pay. That's it. That's where it goes. It's pretty easy to do it. That's why also.
I know companies like, for example, I'll pay tribute to Al Masood Group in Abu Dhabi. In 2008, 2009, they made a commitment as their leadership to not cut a single member of staff. And it really hurt the owners. The owners paid a heavy price for carrying all of those salaries through the crisis, but they believed very strongly in the culture of the organization and that they needed to survive as a team, right? And you still see that level of commitment among the staff at that organization. The average tenure is incredible. It's like 6.5 or 7 years. The average tenure in that organization is a massive company. And so you still see that benefit paying off year after year after year because the commitment is there, the loyalty is there. I also know in one industry in the UAE, 2 different companies that are handling their cost-cutting strategies entirely opposite, right? Same industry, and the industry is slowing down a little bit, is hurting a little bit, and so these 2 companies, one of them is, you know, mass redundancies, layoffs. They're cutting executive staff, they're cutting labor staff, and it is having massive negative impact on the organization because it's stealing productivity and performance from the people that are still there.
Yeah.
And the people that are still there are probably looking for jobs anyway. So you're losing your best people.
So
That's what
true.
happens. You're
That
left
is
with
so
average or below
true.
average people because the best people will find
They'll
a job
jump ship.
and they've got the sword hanging on their head.
Exactly
so they're
right.
too worried.
Yeah, the ship is going down, we're going to jump, and the best people jump first, right?
Absolutely.
So you lose productivity and performance, and then you wonder why you didn't actually save money on the bottom line the next year. So you cut all that money to all those labor costs to save money at the end of 1 year, and then you wonder why it didn't impact on the next year's bottom line.
Absolutely.
Well, that's why. You didn't save any money. You just deferred the cost to the next year's lack of productivity.
Yes.
That's what you did.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then
Right? But I know another company, in exactly the same industry, with the same pressures and the same market, suffering the same issues, that has made a strong commitment to their employees, not laid off and made redundant a single employee. And they've offered things like unpaid leave or extended vacations, and they're certainly not hiring, but they've made a commitment to make sure that not a single person gets laid off because of cost cutting.
Yeah.
So it's a choice. It is I believe very strongly it is a leadership choice.
Yeah.
It is a leadership choice, but just to play devil's advocate, I think there are times when you need to maybe restructure or look, environment changes, the economic environment changes, impacts your industry. There is a crisis. You maybe need to do this. Okay, maybe you need to do this. I think it's really important also in terms of how it's done.
Sure.
What support. I mean, I've been in a company where we had to lay off 150 people in one day.
Wow.
And we
That's
did
hard.
everything from helping them. We paid an external agency to help them find jobs.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I
We
do.
gave them
Yeah.
hours of training on interviewing skills.
Yep.
We helped them build up their CVs. We gave them workshops, and we gave them a severance package.
That's great.
So we did all these things, and I promise you, not one legal case, not one court case did
That's
we
great.
have from those 150. In fact, they were talking positively about us out there because they understood this is
Yeah.
where we are. This is where the business is.
So
It had to be done,
important,
but
yeah.
they've really done it properly, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what's really important, to do it properly. Don't disrespect people and don't.
Exactly.
You know,
No, I give the same advice to CEOs. Like if you have your insolvency papers on one hand, you can look at redundancy plans on the other.
Yeah.
If that's really the decision you're making, to cut off an arm to save the body,
Yes.
fine,
Yes.
right? That's
Yeah.
the decision that you're
Yeah.
making.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you want to help those people as much as you can because you don't want them leaving being anti-ambassadors of the brand or
Absolutely.
anti-ambassadors of the
100%.
company.
It's so
Yes.
important.
Yeah, then they go to your competitors and undermine you with the inside knowledge that they have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Word of mouth is amazing marketing, right? So
It's absolutely true, yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be so careful.
Especially employment,
Yeah.
especially with the websites like Glassdoor. I mean, you can just go on there and
Yeah.
look people can say anything about any company.
It's true.
So,
Yeah. With social
yeah.
media now, you need to be
Yeah, that's
even
true.
more careful. It was very different in the old days. It was just exactly that, word of mouth. But now it's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to leadership and management and CEOs or C-level executives making these difficult decisions. If they're watching us right now and they say, oh yeah, you know what, I never really received that kind of leadership training that I think I should have had at that transition in my career. Now I'm doing 90% leadership, but I have no idea if I'm good at it. What do they do? How do they address that?
Well, first of all, admitting it is step number one. Is actually having the humility to say, I really don't know, or I'm not 100% confident what I'm doing here.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's step number one. Step number two is, okay, so what are the resources available to me that can really help me to get the skills that I need and to build that confidence? So that's either having an internal conversation, it depends on the relationship that they have with their organisation.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but if they've got a really great relationship with their organisation, they can then start to talk about mentoring, coaching,
Yeah.
leadership skills, whatever that might be. If they don't have a great relationship, then they are a little bit more limited in terms of what they can do.
Yeah, sure.
But I think some of the best leaders in the world are they look at their sort of the leadership team below them, and they'll bring them into the room and they'll say, guys, this is what I'm really good at. This is where I'm not so good.
Yeah.
You guys make up for my areas of improvement.
Yeah.
Let's put a strategy together. Let's put a vision together, and
Right.
sort of that inclusive kind of
Yeah,
leadership is
absolutely.
a really good way of doing it. But I think ultimately it's that self-learning, self-development, and then reaching out for help as and when you need it.
Yeah.
I think really importantly, absolutely endorse everything you said, Zeta, but over and above that, I think CEOs need to know that they can't be everything, that they're not everything.
Yeah, nobody's
they're not the
omni-talented,
best
right?
head of operations, they're not the best HR guy, they're not the best CFO.
Yeah,
okay?
that's right.
They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay, and they need to trust their team to do the rest and to get on with it.
Yeah.
And that's you don't need to control everything. You don't need to be be part of, you need to trust your people and let go. Number one. Number two, exactly what you said is how do you know what you don't know? You think you're not good at this, but how do you have the guts to actually get your senior leadership team together and say, what is it that I need to do better?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do I just really be honest without, and if you have that kind of trusting relationship with your senior team, that'll tell you what are the 2 or 3 things that you need to focus on, and then get the help that you need to make it happen.
Just as a tip for executives, if you know that your people are not going to criticize you when you ask for feedback, here's a great open-ended question that you can use. What do you want me to do? So you start with a question like, what are the things that I'm doing well that you appreciate, and then after that you follow up with a question, and what is it that you want me to do? And that's an open-ended way for them to deliver criticism without it sounding like criticism.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a much healthier way of getting that feedback rather than going the 360 route and doing this on a computer and stuff. I just think that is so much more personal and so much more real than the whole 360.
Yeah, I'll often
situation.
ask, how can I support you in your role? How can I help you?
Absolutely.
What can I provide for you? Because that gives them an opportunity to criticize me without saying, hey, well, listen, I wish you would just do it this way. Yeah, you're terrible. You're a terrible delegator. No, but it opens the door for criticism without it feeling like criticism from their side. Because I'm very happy to receive critical feedback, very happy to invite critical feedback, but especially in this area of the world, we're very reticent to deliver critical feedback because honor and shame are such a big part of our cultures.
Yes, absolutely.
Marshall Goldsmith always talks about the courage, humility, discipline. So having the courage to ask for the feedback, the humility to take the feedback, to learn from the feedback and to implement the feedback. Well, that's the discipline to then implement the feedback.
Yeah, that's right.
So it goes back to your
all
point.
goes back to EQ, and that's a whole other topic. We should actually talk about EQ and what's like EQ.
Yeah.
Well, quickly, what is EQ, and why should C-suite leaders pay attention to it?
Absolutely. I mean, EQ is to me, it's like I'm a guru of that whole Daniel Goleman, the book. I've read it 10 times. I give it to my team. To me, that's the recipe for success. Being aware of yourself, being aware of people around you, having that just self-awareness. It's incredible how leaders have such little self-awareness. They don't even know about the impact that they're having. It's like blinders. Absolutely. So I think that's a whole different topic that we should...
If we look at evolutionary psychology, we are primarily emotional machines that have learned how to think over the last few thousand years, right? True. So we're still primarily emotional machines. There's a tremendous amount of momentum in the direction of us reacting emotionally. And we're very often not aware of how we feel about something in order to choose a reaction. So emotional intelligence, for those who don't know, is the ability to be aware of your emotional state and then the ability to control your emotional reaction. And then the next 2 layers are the ability to be aware of the emotional state of people around you, and then the ability to influence the emotional state of those around you. So those are the 4 layers of emotional intelligence, but incredibly huge skills for leaders. And that, I think, is the difference. One of the differences between leadership and management is management doesn't have to deal with the emotional intelligence in the room, and leadership really does.
Absolutely.
Is it just my imagination, but maybe sort of 3-4 years ago, EQ was this really big thing, and now it's just kind of gone... Not many people are talking about it. It's not over when on LinkedIn particularly, there was about a year where every post, every article was about emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it was a fad for a while.
And now it just doesn't seem to be as, even though I still think it's critical, but it just doesn't seem to have.
We can revive it. I think in the 90s, leadership was a fad. That's when John Maxwell said leadership is influence, and that's it. That was his only definition, right? Remember that?
Right.
So it was a big thing, and I think EQ from Dan Goldman is another thing. We can't let it die. It's an amazing set of tools, and I absolutely agree. It's one of the major differences between good managers and good leaders is the ability to control their own emotional state and control the emotional state in the room. So that's, for you C-suiters, that's something you need to concentrate on, is emotional intelligence, because #we are humans, not resources, and you need to start treating us like people. And we also need to start treating each other like people.
Even though AI is out there.
man.
There's still going to be human beings around.
I have met so many executives that are genuinely insecure on the inside, and they have no one to talk to about it, and they end up talking to their executive coaches or their career coaches. That's why we're here.
Very
the
lonely.
HR
It's a
directors.
very lonely place.
It's extremely lonely at the top,
Yeah.
and I have those conversations with CEOs all the time. It's like, oh, am I doing it right? I'm just not sure, but I can't appear not confident in front of my people because I need to be a strong leader. And
it's very much about image and how you're seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because anything asking a question or not knowing about something is viewed as weakness. Although it's it's a very culture has a huge impact on the leadership style here.
It's the perception of leadership, isn't it? So a lot of my clients will say to me, well, my perception of leadership is this, because that's what social media and everything tells us leadership should be, but I'm not that, and I'm massively insecure now. And it's actually, well, you've got some really great skills, otherwise you wouldn't be in this leadership position. We just now need to figure out how to capitalize on those, and then how to find ways to support the areas of development, whether that's through your leadership team, etc. So
Good. So takeaways for the C-suiters. If you think you're a strong leader, you're probably wrong, statistically speaking, based on actual research. There's really easy ways to get right about how strong you are as a leader. Engage an executive coach, do some reading, at least learn the basics of emotional intelligence, and that will set you on the right path. And then build a commitment with your people. Be committed to your tribe, to your economic community, to your corporate community, and they will be committed to you in return. All right, so I thank you so much for being with us. This was really a lot of fun. We've got some great takeaways from today, and leadership. Leadership, yes. We need more of it.
Yes.
We need more of it.
We need more of it.
Yes. So
Absolutely.
engage some leadership specialists in your next round of budgeting. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.